Hey there, Motorheads. Why am I so happy? Well, it's finally time to start working on sleds. That's why. So what we have here, sled heads, is a 1983 cross-country Indy. It was a one-year only model, although it's really just a graphics package. It was the same as the TXL Indy was from 1980 to 1982. So one thing that makes the 1983 model year unique, in addition to the cool gold graphics and the stripe on the seat, is that this is the only year with the old Polaris slant logo left over from the 70s. But there is no mention of Textron here. This is the first year that Polaris bought themselves back, and this is the first incarnation of the modern Polaris. The next year, of course, would change to the logo that everybody knows today that they had until, I think, just a year ago. Really didn't change much even then. Under the hood's your basic TXL engine. Was largely unchanged from 78 until this being the last year in 1983. 77 was a little bit of a hotter motor than the later motors, but actually pretty similar overall. The only major change to these motors was the crank stub that sticks out. It used to have a real long crank stub that took a deep taper clutch, and these later ones have a shorter crank stub. They take just a standard 30 millimeter clutch. Otherwise, pretty basic stuff on here. Just your basic Indy. Let's fire it up. Let's make some two-stroke smoke. Come in, Farley. So, as you can see, this is a running and driving sled, but that doesn't mean it's necessarily a sled I can trust. I bought it from my buddy Chad, who bought it from my buddy Chris, and neither of them know any background on this sled. Chris didn't even tell me where he got it. When I asked him what he went through or what he did, he said nothing. I just bought it and resold it. So, before I go out and start ditch banging this thing, I'm going to go through it and do chain case, jack shaft, drive shaft bearings, just because those really suck if those go out on the trail. I'll go through the skid, but then the big part of the plan for this is to put in an SLP 404 big bore kit. So externally it looks just like this 340 motor, but it does have twin pipes, and being a 404 instead of a 332, it does make some more power. So that's basically what the project is. It's kind of nice that this one didn't live outside. It's not full of mice, and I don't have to clean out the fuel system. So kind of a nice, easy entry into sled season for me this year. Of course, you never know what future projects will hold. So I usually start out a big project like this by pulling the hood. Then I'll pull out the exhaust, the airbox, the clutches. Then I'll drop the skid and get the chain case and the drive shaft out. So I'm just going to start tearing into it. I'm in no big hurry. This might take me a couple nights, but that's fine. All right, I don't want to damage that bulb. Somebody bought a nice halogen for this thing. And, wow. Get a clean paper towel, pull that off, and put it somewhere safe. So I imagine a lot of people know this, but you don't ever want to touch a halogen bulb. The oils and grease or dirt from your fingers will make a hot spot on it, make the glass, you know, basically get a blister. And the next thing you know, your expensive bulb is blowing. What did they do? Glue those on? Son of a bitch, they did glue them on. All right, hood successfully removed. Awesome. Better access to everything this way. Sometimes the best exhaust spring tool is a pair of vice grips, especially when you got to kind of rotate the tail end around. The reason I'm pulling this exhaust off is because there's a drain plug right there for the coolant. And if you can get that pulled, you'll actually get most of the coolant. And you can kind of sneak a bucket up underneath there and catch it. Although I will say on this Indy, maybe I can't get a bucket in there like I could on a regular leaf spring TXL. Yeah, the bucket that I usually use is just not going to work. So I always do what I can to keep the coolant off the floor. And I'm sure you know why. She's running around the shop right now. My little Farley girl. If my memory is correct, there's really not much coolant in this, you know, above this plug. Okay, that's more than I remembered. I think I'll get that plug out and plug that hole again. Moving right along here. Time for another beer and let's get those clutches off. So Polaris uses a 7/16 bolt on their clutches instead of a 1/2 inch. So that's a 5/8 head. Conveniently located hole in the belly pan. There we have it. Here's our white bushing. All right, next on to the puller. So before you use your puller, always anti-seize the end and the threads. Makes them last a lot longer, makes them work a lot better, greatly increases your chances of success. So I don't remember what I put in this for Chad last year, but obviously it's a light blue Polaris spring, and those look like some pretty light weights. Guessing they're 10 MRs. Doesn't matter. Not going to use this clutch anyways. Just grab the brake when you gotta crack the nut or the bolt loose on the secondary. That'll hold everything still. Out she comes. Oh, nice. All greased up, almost like somebody that knew what they were doing did that for Chad last year. Oh yeah, I did. All right, so I've already got the throttle cable disconnected from the handlebars, just because that makes it a lot easier to get the air box out. So I'm going to undo the choke cable over here at the dash, a couple coolant hoses, a bunch of wires down in here, a fuel line, and I think I'm going to take the recoil off too, and probably keep the recoil with the engine. After that, 3 bolts hold the motor plate in. Most people probably know this, but it's just a big nut here on the choke. Just a plastic nut. You got to use the pliers. Open the choke up, or I should say turn the choke on. It comes right off. Fish her out through the hole. Look at that. Still got the star washer. Very nice. I always thread the nut back on so you don't lose it. And look at this. We're still in the factory clip here on the chain case. That's a miracle. You just don't see that on these old sleds very much. At least I don't. Not on the quality of sleds I normally work on. All right, so coil is going to stay with the chassis. So we'll unplug those wires. And then down here, you can see this. We'll unplug the 2-pin black connector for the coil. CDI box is hidden down in here, so we'll have to unplug that. That's the smaller of the 2 connectors. And then the bigger connector is the body, and that just basically fell apart. And this last one here, the single pin, this is your kill switch. So you definitely want to get that undone. Don't want to break your kill switch wire off. So that's all the wiring for the motor. And then, if I can find my nut driver with the 5/16 on it, take off those hoses. So there's no 2 ways about it. You're going to spill a little antifreeze, especially on this lower hose. Probably not much on this upper. And you just got to clean up the mess. There's just no good way to totally drain these motors. Oh, that wire came with, but that's fine. That wire is for the over temp sensor for the coolant. All right, we got 3/8 fine thread nuts that have to come off, and then the sled comes out. This one back here, I always end up using a ratchet wrench on. So this one I'm working on right now is actually it's a carriage bolt. There's a little threaded sleeve on there. And I don't know, there's like a washer with a square broached into it, welded onto the tunnel. So if you ever have this start spinning, You're going to want to replace that when you got the track out. Pretty much going to have to take the gas tank off so you're not spilling fuel all over, flip it over, and TIG weld a new one on. All right, a little bit of a tricky job. You got to somehow get your socket up on those. I think I'm going to close this and maybe come from the side. You got to get your socket up on those bolt heads through these holes in the belly pan. All right, motorheads, I'm not going to kid you. My camera ran out of batteries and I didn't realize it till after the motor was out. So this isn't the actual motor pull. This is just a tribute. The complication here is that the speedo cable goes through the big hole in the motor plate. But it's not that bad because this motor is actually really light. Success. Motor is out. No big deal. So with the motor out, I finally have a really good look in the belly pan, and she is filthy. So that seals the deal. Once I get it all apart, I'm going to pull off the seat in the gas tank too, and I'm going to drag it outside and pressure wash inside the belly pan, just because I like my stuff to be clean. Even if it isn't pretty and restored, it can at least be clean. All right, I'm going to call it there for part one. Normally it takes me about an hour to get a motor out of a sled. Took me a little longer tonight because I'm messing around with the camera and microphones and trying to get good videos. But I hope you enjoyed it. Part two is coming up probably next week, maybe sooner. And we're going to get into the chassis more, get the suspension out, and jack shaft, drive shaft, chain case, get all that stuff out. So thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe, and see you next week.